Why would you fix the green screen? It's like like if you were just a disembodied head floating around, that would be one thing. But there's like enough texture to your outfit
It
that
is
it works.
truly delightful. It
Yeah,
really is
yeah. I don't know why
truly.
you would spend 1 second trying to fix this.
I'm gonna try and fix this.
That's your loss.
I just want my camera to work correctly. I'm really annoyed.
Mm.
I have no idea why.
You've swapped the cables.
Yeah, and I know what the problem is. It's getting grabbed by the Elgato virtual camera software, and I can't even figure out where that's turned on. Let me quit that through the task manager. Okay, so now we have an error message. I'm going to make this thing work. I'm going to try and make this thing work. This thing is going to tell me no is what it's going to do. Okay, I'm going to unplug it and replug it one more time.
So people can't probably see now, but maybe you can see it a little bit. There's like a ridge across my forehead from my hard hat.
Oh man.
Yeah. I literally was out in the forest cutting down trees until 10 minutes ago, and now my battery on my chainsaw is charging, and once it's charged up, I'm going to go back out and just keep going.
Okay, I'm switching cameras because apparently that is the thing to do today so that I don't glitch.
I'm really just living the Canadian lifestyle at this point. Like I am just a walking meme of living in Canada, living in the forest with lumberjack.
You sound so happy. You really
it's super
sound
fun.
so happy.
Yeah. What did we talk about this last week?
No.
Maybe we did. Maybe we didn't. No, that they did a survey of favorite jobs, and the job that people feel the happiest and most fulfilled is that they are lumberjacks.
Really?
Yeah. And I think like all the best jobs, all the top jobs seem to have something to do with being outside. So they're like people who work in parks or people who just work outside, and that's a big part of it. And then the other side of it is having a job that's meaningful. And so people who are lumberjacks, I guess they feel they're providing wood that builds people's houses, and so they feel that that's meaningful as well. The unhappiest job, I think, is lawyer.
And that makes way too much sense.
Yeah. And I think people in the medical industry, the work is hard and makes them unhappy, but they also feel like it's very meaningful, so they do it because the meaning gives them value.
Yeah.
But with your on the other side with lawyers, I think they feel that they don't have that same feeling of meaning. So
yeah.
So I think hopefully I can get that balance right where I do, the unwelcome work of explaining the universe to people, and I can balance that net negative that I send into the world by cutting down trees and feeling better about myself. So
net negative. You're calling this a net negative.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my.
Hiding the evidence of the terrifying truth as a disinformation mole for big rocket.
What always gets me is people who think astronomers are capable of like hiding evidence of anything.
Yeah.
Like we will go out of our way to avoid keeping secrets.
Yeah. Apparently your camera, you did it.
Yes, it's a different camera. I switched to a different camera. Right. So no glitching.
Yep. Good.
All right. Setting up my audio and then I'll be ready. Audio file. And this is episode 670.
Mm-hmm.
We are zooming through the numbers.
Just means we're getting older.
I know.
To have done something on a semi-weekly basis for 670 episodes required some time. And we're just that much closer to our graves.
Have you started reaching the point yet where you look at really cool new missions and are like, I hope I still am like here.
I do have these moments. Yeah. Like I remember, man, people are going to give us a hard time for not getting started. Sorry, John Suffield. We'll get to the show in a second. Maybe we should save this for the end of the episode. But yeah, I remember the launch of New Horizons. I'm like, okay, 10 years, 2000
no big deal.
2016, I'll be around for that.
Yeah.
Rosetta, it's going to bed for 10 years. Okay, I'll see you soon, Rosetta.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure, when I think about the Titan Dragonfly arriving in the 2030, 2035, 2038, I'm like, will I still be doing this job by 2038? I think so.
Yeah, 2038 is less scary. It's the ones that launch in 2037 that I'm like, I was looking at Lisa the other day. Lisa's now slated to launch in 2037. It's like, that one's going to take a few years to get good data from.
Yeah, that's too long.
Yeah.
All right, let's get cracking.
I'm pressing that record. Why? Okay, hold on. Stop. All my technology is failing today.
But that's technology's default state.
Mondays, man. Mondays. I hate
I am
Mondays.
a prisoner of an increasingly automated home.
Oh, yeah. Wait until you walk into a room that isn't automated and ask it to turn things on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, like we automated without taking the time to optimize and configure everything and remember passwords and codes and stuff. Like, I don't know the code to open my gate. So I don't use, if someone's like, if you're going to come and we're going to open the gate, give me a call and I'll come down and I'll open the gate for you because I don't know how to open it with the code and I can't give you the code. So we're in a bad place. I feel like we are now just parasites living in the host. We've lost control. All right.
Okay, I'm trying to find something that will feed audio into my recording software, and currently I'm getting a big no from everything. Let's see if I'm like ready to go after this episode is over and spend money on Amazon. I don't know what's going on. Okay.
I will never switch to a Macintosh again for recording audio. That's my line. Like I use a Mac as my daily driver, but I use a PC for recording video and audio. It's just
testing. It's not getting this audio.
Turn it off, turn it back on again.
I've done that.
You turned off the software, the recording software?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to try one more thing. I may have to go get a headset from upstairs.
For your for the podcast software.
I don't know what just occurred. I'm going to share it.
That you've gone green? Can you figure out how you did that? Because I can imagine that being useful for, I don't know, Halloween or St. Patty's Day or something.
Yeah, that's what happens when you set your camera to be your audio input as a camera. I don't know why the
kill
software...
loopback and restart it.
It's not loopback. I don't have loopback running. It is literally... Audition is not seeing the microphone I'm talking to you all on. I'm going to restart it. And if this doesn't work, I'm going to run up and down the stairs.
Oh, they're saying you're muted now.
Hello. Hello? Okay, I'm not muted.
I hear you.
Yeah. I hate everything right now. Everything.
Why? I don't know why you say right now. Like, hating technology should be your default state?
I was happy for a little bit. I was using my Steam Deck yesterday. The technology
Mm,
brought me joy.
man, I love my Steam Deck. What are you playing?
Minecraft of all things.
That's cool that you got it working on the Steam Deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, like once you figure out a couple of ways to like there's some more like it's a little complicated to figure out how to work it in the beginning. You have to get used to it, but then once you do, it's just so nice just sitting on
Yeah.
the couch playing on the Steam Deck. Yeah, I have not played a game on my computer since I got my Steam Deck.
It is really good that way. And the the controls sometimes make me sad, so I switched to using my Switch controller on it. Just because it's like the Steam Deck itself is meant for someone whose hands are a bit bigger than mine, or at least their thumbs are longer.
Do you use a separate Switch controller to access your Steam Deck?
If I'm running it through a monitor, yeah. If I'm not running it through a monitor, no. But
Okay, okay,
so
okay.
like if I'm running it through a monitor, yeah,
Oh,
might as
I've
well.
never run mine through a monitor. I always just
Oh,
use this little screen.
okay. I was happily Minecrafting my little heart out, and I had it up on a big monitor. And please see the microphone. No. Okay, I'm gonna have to be right back. Do you want to try and record tomorrow when I can debug everything?
Like you want to stop this episode now?
Well, before I run up the stairs, I'm asking you because I'm happy to keep going.
Yeah, I'd rather keep going. I mean,
Okay,
I'm sure
I
people
will
are
be
here.
right
Everyone's
back.
here. I'm here. Let's get it
Yep.
done.
Okay.
Okay. And I guess that means it's time for a rant while we wait. So I have been continuing to watch the Three Body Problem on YouTube. You can access the whole episode. They're up to episode 28, which we're one episode. There's 30 episodes total, and we're one episode away from the ship, which if you've read the book, then you know what I'm talking about. And I've got new and more complex thoughts about the Three Body Problem. This is, of course, the famous science fiction work by Liu Cixin, and it is it's on the one hand, it's really interesting to watch a piece of media that is like a Chinese written science fiction story, but then is interpreted by Chinese media and presented to a Chinese audience. And we are third-party observers watching this process happen. And there are little things in it that are quite interesting, just in sort of the way it shows off various cultural issues and aspects and so on. And there's too many to go into. I think I never noticed when I read the original book, but like the environmentalists are the bad guys, and yet they talk about how environmentalism is really kind of good and important, but it's sort of funny that all the environmentalists are the baddies. There is some critique of the state, which is very interesting to me in various ways, that the state is perceived as kind of being unfair in various ways, which is kind of funny. And they turned a book into 30 episodes. They literally just took it scene by scene, text by text, and just recreated it. And in the beginning, I was quite excited, and now it's kind of long and boring. So I could see that making it a little zippier is a good way to go. So anyway, but it's turning out to be, I think, one of the most popular things that's ever popular television shows ever made in China. So I hope we get the sequels, and the sequels are where things get bonkers, like The Dark Forest and Earth's End. Earth's End are quite amazing, and the ideas are over the top. And at this point, with the success of the Three Body Problem, I can't imagine that they won't go all in on doing the next versions of the show. So, yeah, it's
What are you talking about?
but the three body problem, the Chinese edition of the three body problem. We're like 2 episodes away. Like I think within 2 days, the final episodes will be available. Death's End, that's it. Yeah, Death's End. So the Death's End is the third book. So the second and third books are bonkers, but the first book is has human beings walking around and eating at restaurants at temporary, with the second book and the third book, which are like, I don't know, but they did stuff like they recreated the video and were able to show it is like this made of millions of soldiers who were putting up flags to make things go. So Guido, we were saying Netflix should just scrap their version and dub the Chinese original. I don't think so. Like, I think there are problems in this episode. There are problems with the source. There are problems with the, I think if you look into the philosophies espoused by Liu Cixin, there are problems. Yeah. But it is also like a very, my audio is clipping apparently.
You sound fine to me.
Okay.
Can folks hear me?
A couple of people are saying. Sure, our audience is...
We're sorry, humans.
You broke my audio too. Yeah, they can hear you. Okay, it's all good now.
Okay.
Yeah, so they think it may have been some dropouts, but it was happening when you were, and now I'm not in sync. And I totally see that I'm not in sync. Not in sync. Let's just go. Go.
Okay. I am pressing record on my audio, which is actually recording, record on the video. Everything is actually recording.
I'm also recording. Okay. Here we go. Astronomy Cast, episode 670, Governing Space, the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 and more. Welcome to Astronomy Cast, a weekly facts-based journey through the cosmos, where we help you understand not only what we know, but how we know what we know. I'm Fraser Cain. I'm the publisher of Universe Today. With me, as always, is Dr. Pamela Veit, a senior scientist for the Planetary Science Institute and the director of CosmoQuest. Hey, Pamela, how you doing?
I am doing well, and I am more grateful to our patrons than normal today because all of my technology has gone no. And after the show is over, I will be buying a replacement microphone because you are out there to allow this to happen. Mm-hmm. So thank you.
Wonderful. Nice. Thank you, patrons. The universe was inaccessible for most of human history, but the first tentative steps to space in the 20th century made humanity realize that science fiction was becoming science reality. New rules would have to be written to govern how we used this limitless expanse. Today, we'll talk about the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, and we'll get into that in a second. But first, it's time for a break.
And I am going to open my soda and drink from my soda because I ran up and down the stairs.
Apparently, it's as if I'm dubbed.
He is not. All right.
All right. And we're back.
I just lost your audio.
You lost my audio?
Wait, where's it coming out?
How about now?
Now
Testing.
yes.
Can you hear me?
Okay. I have a bad cable in my headphones too, apparently.
Okay. And we're back. Okay, Pamela. It's interesting to me to sort of think about this time, like before even the first spacecraft was launched. And, science fiction writers had been considering what the future of human space exploration would be. But I wonder, like, what perspective did people give, do you think, on how humanity's nations would extend out beyond planet Earth?
Well, It all actually started with the 1959 Antarctic Treaty. So at this point, satellites were starting to be a thing. Countries were starting to think about, we would like to call that chunk of Antarctica ours, based on who got which places first. And there was a lot of arguing over who got to which place first and what could be claimed by whom. And so with the 1959 Antarctic Treaty, they set down the idea that the continent of Antarctica belongs to everyone and is there as a place for scientists to explore and no one to commercially exploit. So we started with that, and it was that document that then in many ways formed the starting point of even the language that was used in the later space treaty. So it all starts with Antarctica, and ironically, this is now where we train a lot of people. So one step at a time.
Right. And so you can't go place a flag and call this part of Antarctica part of Argentina.
Exactly.
Right. This is the colony from Argentina as just more of their space. Yeah. And there are doubtless enormous resources locked under the thick ice shelf. It's just at the time it was just realized that it was so complicated to try and get at it that it and the value of it as a pristine wilderness and as a place to do research was greater, that they all came together and agreed and formed the Antarctic Treaty. Okay, so then how did the Antarctic Treaty then bleed into, like, what were the events that brought everyone together to start writing the Outer Space Treaty?
So in 1958, as they're working on drafting the Antarctic Treaty that would be ratified the following year, the Committee on Space Research, COSPAR, was an international committee, and it was pulled together to start looking at, well, people are now going around and around our planet. We should start figuring out how to govern this. And COSPAR is still out there today. And the following year, in 1959, we had the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, which is headquartered out of Vienna. It's still there. The building that it's in actually appeared in an Avengers movie, which confused me. But I don't question these things. It just happens. And
cool building.
And so we had those two organizations coming together to try and figure out literally the peaceful uses for space. They tied it straight into the name. And then in 1963, we started having new nations, in addition to the U.S. and USSR, starting to look at nuclear weapons. We had the U.S. and USSR testing their weapons. And that was the year that they came up with the Limited Test Ban Treaty, which basically said, thou shalt not test nuclear weapons in the air, in the ocean, or in outer space. So it was under the influence of, first we have the Antarctic Treaty saying, this land is going to be shared by everyone. We're going to do everything we can to not exploit it, not pollute it, and we're going to take care of each other. So if someone in one thing starts to have issues, people in the other habitat will go rescue them. All of this came together.
I mean, it's crazy to think, right, that they were just detonating nuclear weapons on islands in the South Pacific or on islands in Siberia, that they were just finding out. And obviously the original tests in the US, they would just blow these things up just to find out and to keep making them more powerful. And there would be fallout, and radiation would be kicked into the atmosphere. Like, it's crazy. And yet
there was a John Wayne movie where they have traced a high cancer incidence of people who were on set to nearby nuclear testing. So with all of those terrible things going on in this world, people started to say, okay, let's step back and let's make Antarctica first, and then the area around our world, places that aren't going to be a hot mess, for lack of a better phrase. But that is really the best way to sum up the page after page after page of these documents.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we've got to this point where people have come together twice to consider topics that are I guess the two pieces of the puzzle, because like I always joke about the Outer Space Treaty that it's really all about nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Like the vast majority of the Outer Space Treaty is thinking about nuclear weapons in space.
And
right.
And that's that direct history coming out of 1963 with the limited test ban treaty, and the realization of, we can put things in orbit now. And this is a big debate in both of our nations right now, where they keep finding small inflatables above our continents and then shooting them down. When you can put things in orbit, you can put them over anywhere.
Yes. All right, we're going to talk about the actual Outer Space Treaty in a second, but it's time for another break. Can you drink?
I can. I would love to. I was going to let you just keep going, but thank you.
And we're back. Okay, so then let's talk about the Outer Space Treaty itself.
So the Outer Space Treaty, as initially signed in 1967, very much followed the language of the Antarctic Treaty, as I said. So it is to be shared by everyone for peaceful scientific pursuits, but it was realized over the years that it needed to be amended. So just 1 year passed before they were like, let's add language in 1968 that there's now a rescue agreement. So the idea is, if, say, something goes catastrophically wrong on the International Space Station, the Chinese astronauts who have the capacity, they probably don't right now because the orbits are different, but if the Chinese astronauts had the capacity to go rescue the US and Russian astronauts, they would be required to do it by the 1968 rescue agreement. That makes complete sense, makes for great plots of movies. Then in 1972, as we started getting more and more things in orbit, the idea of, well, what if your spacecraft crashes into my spacecraft problem arose.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's happened.
It has. And it recently almost happened again, where there were 2 dead spacecraft that came within a few meters of each other. Mm-hmm. And so in 1972, they added on the Space Liability Convention, which literally says that if your spacecraft crashes into my spacecraft, you are liable for my costs. Fair enough.
Right. And so, like, at this point, like, the rules are you can't own space.
Yes.
You can't plant a flag. You can't say the moon is ours. We own it. You can't put nuclear weapons in space.
Yes.
And you can't, for example, have a nuclear launch platform that is flying overhead that could drop bombs on your enemy cities within 10 seconds.
Theoretically,
right?
You can't put any weapons platforms in space.
No weapons platforms in space.
Theoretically.
Right.
I mean, we do periodically blow up our own stuff to show that we can. It's a bit problematic.
Yeah. You are obligated to rescue anybody in space if you can. That's very similar to maritime law.
Yes.
Like if you get the SOS call, you are duty bound to go and provide rescue.
And that was actually
Canadian measles.
That was actually a joke in Andy Weir's The Martian, where you have the Watley character basically saying that he was a Martian pirate. As he was affecting various sites on Mars and basically trying to figure out what laws worked for what things. And since then, it has been figured out that Mars does not follow maritime law. But it was an interesting moment in the book.
Right. Yeah. Okay, all right. So that's the law so far. And were there any more modifications to it?
Yeah, is as things keep getting more complicated, we realize there's more things we need to keep track of. And these are committees that are still out there functioning. And if committees are capable of anything, it's coming up with rules. So in 1976, they came out with the Registration Convention that says anything you launch into space and put into orbit needs to be registered with the UN. So we have a central registry. It's that same office in Vienna, and the registration is just supposed to say what the purpose of the spacecraft is. You can basically be as vague as you want.
Right. So if you're going to launch a reconnaissance satellite, you have to identify that it is that you've launched it, but you don't have to say what it does.
Right. They often get
Right.
away with Earth surveillance, which
Right.
isn't accurate-ish phrase.
Sure. Yeah.
And then in 1979, many years after the Apollo missions, they came out with the Moon Treaty, which was an additional step that not just for the moon, but for all the other bodies. And the original treaty, just to give the full name of it, was Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies. The idea of the Moon Treaty Amendment in 1979 was to protect the things that we've put on the moon so far. So to essentially say you can't go spray paint the Apollo missions, you can't go beat up Luna and bring it back. So I don't know why you would beat up Luna, but you can't go bring it back. So we can't essentially have museums stealing historic artifacts from the surface of the moon. This is who we are as people, that we need to worry about these things, and we're just trying to protect the world.
All right, we're going to talk about this some more, but it's time for another break. Chug, chug, chug.
Yep. Okay.
And we're back. So was this the end of the original Outer Space Treaty? Were there more amendments?
This was the end of the original Outer Space Treaty, and since then we've seen more and more bilateral agreements, where there are the agreements between the US and Russia for the International Space Station. There are multi-nation agreements. This is where Japan later joined, as did other nations. Canada, I believe, was actually an original signatory, so it wasn't bilateral, it was multinational. You have closed agreements for things like the International Space Station. You have closed agreements for things like nations planning space missions to Mars together. And this new turn from multinational through the United Nations really came to a head with the Artemis Accords. This is a series of bilateral agreements between the United States and other nations that set out to describe how essentially people are going to share all of their data just like NASA does. So if you become part of the Artemis Accords, you're required to make all of your scientific data public. It negotiates how international standards are going to be used. So everyone's airlocks are going to be compatible with everyone else's airlocks. Now, there are some surprising nations that are not signing on to the Artemis Accord so far.
Let me guess. Russia?
Well, yes, that's not surprising.
And China.
Also not surprising.
Okay.
But we didn't see early enthusiasm either from Germany or India, which are countries we do work with. And the concerns on this are, it's very much NASA saying, if you want to play in our sandbox, and it is not NASA so much as Congress saying, if you want to play in our sandbox, you have to sign on our nation to your nation bilaterally. So it's not Japan and Germany or Italy and Romania. Romania has their own space agency.
Right.
It is not everyone going through the United Nations. It is literally you are signing an agreement with the United States, negotiating whatever you negotiate, and saying, let's go in it together. And anytime you have one nation saying, I am going to lead the way, instead of one nation saying, let's make a committee, and this is where you see some
Right.
fascinating comparisons where it was Eisenhower who originally was saying Antarctica shouldn't belong to one nation, and it built on that, to now everyone, NASA saying everyone has to go with us.
Right. I mean, I think that there are a lot of new opportunities that are coming up with space. As we're becoming more capable in space, we're seeing a bunch of issues start to rise. And I know that Congress has been trying to think about this. One is the rise of space debris,
Yes.
that you can't keep launching spacecraft and it to be sustainable. There was an interesting paper that I read. They calculated that we need to remove 5 pieces of space debris per 5 like dead spacecraft at these higher
Yeah.
altitudes, like these spent boosters or these dead solids per year, to keep up with the rate that debris is accumulating in space. And that if we don't, then we're heading towards that Kessler syndrome. So we need that level of communication, not just like, can you get approval from the US to fly your mission, because it's going to go over the ocean, it's going to go over other
Yeah.
countries. Like, we're going to get to a point where we need to have these kinds of agreements. And then the other one is control over the resources, like asteroids, things like that. You can't own the moon, you can't own an asteroid, but the rules about you being able to harvest resources from that asteroid are a lot muddier.
Yes.
Like, was InSight, when it was digging in the ground, right? Was it mining regolith
Yeah.
for its own
Yeah.
purpose, or was it performing science? So I think that there's just this gray area. And then I think as we have more people going into space, then the militarization of space comes along with it. And what are the rules for the militarization of space? I mean, can you send an armed ship to protect satellites? Can satellites kill other satellites? What are the rules about that?
And we see strange things happening on orbit where you can watch as one nation's mission will creep up on another nation's mission and just hang out, eavesdropping presumably upon it.
Right.
And so as we consider just what are the consequences of a full-on Kessler syndrome occurring, what are the consequences of hydrazine is a fairly terrible chemical that we have had various rocket accidents in the past lead to hydrazine making it back onto the surface of the planet. Well, what about crashing it onto Mars? What about crashing it onto the moon? These treaties also look to protect the landscapes. We have to figure out what the boundaries are, what counts as an accident, how we handle things before they go wrong, so we're not trying to figure it out in the moment that everything is going wrong.
What? You think we'll do that?
I think we'll try.
Oh, okay. We'll try. Yeah. Yeah. People will recognize the issue and make warnings that other people should take very seriously, but won't.
Yes.
Right. And then, like, you think about some of these other, like, really far out ideas. Like, what if Elon Musk pulls it off and starts building a city on Mars? Is that legal?
Well,
like, does that currently violate the Outer Space Treaty?
So currently you can build a scientific resource, a scientific research base. Currently you can do basic tourism. All these things that you see going on in Antarctica, totally fine to also do at Mars. Treat Mars like Antarctica.
And so you can imagine a Elon Musk city as being a research station into human suffering.
Yes, he is planning to build the company town.
Right. But like, just like, what's it like to live? How awful is it to live on Mars? Right. Terrible.
Yeah.
Let's find out. Let's really do the research to find out how terrible it is.
But it does bring up things like when the US was settled, and here I have to admit a gap in my Canadian knowledge. After our country was pretty much emptied of the indigenous people by diseases, we sent out settlers who basically could homestead land, and if they maintained the land and lived on it for a certain number of years, it became their own. And so the question becomes, do we allow these people who are going to be homesteading on Mars to say that that land is theirs? And no, technically we don't. And that is exactly how every book ends up leading to Mars eventually declaring itself separate.
Right.
It's like,
yeah. If you want us to move, come and kick us out.
Exactly.
That possession is 9/10 of the law in this situation. And it's interesting. Like a lot of people I see in the YouTube comments will make these things like, well, China is going to the moon and they're just going to start claiming big chunks of the moon for themselves for their helium-3 mining facilities, but they can't.
Right.
They can't claim chunks of the moon. What the rules are in extracting resources from the moon is still, there are not good laws to cover this. Yeah. So I think the exact same rules that we have here on Earth with what are the rules about flying airplanes across other people's airspace? Right. What are the rules about putting boats out into the middle of the ocean? What are the rules about mining the deep sea? All of these, we've gone through this process. We know how to do this, and we know how to ignore the recommendations from scientists and the lawyers that are working on it. But all of these problems are gonna continue to crop up.
It's going to be interesting in the Firefly definition of, oh my God, we're all going to die for some bank accounts as companies try and find out what the limits are, what exactly can happen. But hopefully it's only going to be bank accounts that get hurt as companies find the limitations of the law.
There was an interesting study that I saw a couple of years ago about trying to predict what would make good wilderness in the solar system. That, if you just take our gross domestic product and you just continue to ramp it up, we will be extracting resources across the solar system in a few hundred years. It's kind of inevitable.
Yes.
And so then the question is, like, do we want to leave Mars as this really pristine wilderness with, this amazing trench, these cool volcanoes, all of the features on Mars? Like, there's plenty of rocks to grind up, but there are probably places across the solar system that are so special that we should leave them as wildernesses. And we have those here on Earth. We have these, UNESCO heritage sites. Do we start setting up UNESCO heritage sites? So there's it had always been theoretical that we wouldn't really have to think about how we're going to get along, how we share this resource of the universe. It was inaccessible and incomprehensible. And now we're getting to the point where these are starting to be real issues that we're going to have to wrangle and wrap our heads around.
It's a brave new world out there, and we're going to see this in our lifetime. And that is something I don't know if I would have been saying when we started recording this show.
Yeah, really interesting. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Pamela.
And thank you, Fraser. And thank you to everyone out there on Patreon. We read the folks who donate $10 and higher each month, and we are grateful for all of you, even those who only donate $1. This week, I would like to thank Georgie Ivanov, Will Hamilton, Michael Pochaudo, Burry Gowen, Stephen Veit, Jordan Young, Jeanette Wink, Nano Fleeps, Bora Andre Livsvol, Andrew Poelstra, Venkatesh Chary, Brian Cagle, David Truog, Gerhard Schwarzer, David, Buzz Parsect, Zero Chill, Laura Kettleson, Robert Poelstra, Jack Mudge, Les Howard, Joe Holstein, Gordon Dewis, Frank Tippin, and Adam Annis Brown, Alexis, Richard Drum, Wanderer M101, Astro Zeitz, Felix Goot, William Andrews, Gold, Roland Vormerdam, Jeff Collins, Simon Parton, Kellyanne and David Parker, Jeremy Kerwin, Stuart Mills, Harold Badenhagen, Marco Iorasi, Georgie Ivanov, Scott Bieber, Kimberly Rake, Daniel Loosely. Thank you all so much for everything you do to allow us to keep doing what we do.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye. And then they saved.
Whee.
Okay.
It's interesting to think about compounding interest rate, like compounding expansion. And this is the only, was it Einstein said, like, the only magic is compound interest. That we, like, if you just take the gross domestic product of Earth, it's like whatever 2%, and you just project it forward, it's only a couple hundred years and we will be everywhere.
So here,
all over the solar system.
Here's one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is past growth in gross domestic product also factored in the assumption that the population would continue to grow. And we're starting to see nations like Japan that have 30% of their populace is over age 65. We're seeing population decreases in China and the United States. The birth rate has dropped off. And for our planet to be able to sustain us, we need to stop growing the population. So is that going to affect the exploration rate, or are we going to find a way to grow the GDP so that the per capita is increasing at a significantly higher level than we've ever seen before?
Of course you know the answer to this. It will grow. Right? Like,
but
if you can trace back humanity's use of energy for tens of thousands of years,
but with population increase,
smooth exponential growth curve, and there's no reason to think that our population, because there are rich people who use the energy resources of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. So if there are less people, everybody will attempt to use more resources.
And this is where I'm just sort of like, I really want to see per capita have that massive increase, but I'm worried that instead we're just going to have the population keep increasing.
Well, we're definitely not going to have the population increasing. Like, the population is set to peak in 30 years from now, and then it's just going to decline slowly.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
As long as living is largely getting better and better, then people want to have less kids just because they're
surviving.
In pain. Yeah. And it's interesting, like, you have these countries like taking on, like, as the parent of 2 kids, let me tell you, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of expense and it is a lot of economic hardship that you take on as a parent, and countries consider it like your duty, like your job, like, be a good patriot and have kids.
Yeah.
And you are on your own right? Oh, I'm sorry. You're not able to work because you have kids? Too
Yeah.
bad. You're having kids. So I think it's interesting that you're seeing some of these nations. I think they're going to start taking responsibility. If they're going to ask people to have kids, hopefully they'll take responsibility for the costs, the complexity, the interruption to your standard of living for having those kids. Like, okay, we'll have daycares. Okay, we'll have child
Hmm.
support. Okay, we'll have various resources that are available to you as
Yeah.
parents to meet our population quotas. But even that, I don't think it's going to work. Like, I think that having kids not having kids is a perfectly reasonable option. And when I have friends who say like, we're not gonna have kids, I'm like,
Good.
I get it, man. Like, totally. Like, I was in a really good place and I was able to have kids, but I can't
Yeah.
imagine if I wasn't so well positioned. I worked from home. I was there when I walked my kids to school. I picked them up when they got home. I picked them, took them
Yeah.
home. I was there, present, because I was working from
Yeah.
home. So, yeah, yeah, it's a tough thing. So I think, anyway,
And kids
I
aren't necessarily leaving home anymore because the economy is so skewed between the differences between wealthy and just everyday working class is making it very, very hard for people to get out from their parents' house, here in the States at least. And that's also going
yeah,
to affect if you're still living with your parents, you're probably not going to have kids.
yeah.
So,
But I would not bet against energy use growing.
yes.
Like,
Yeah.
it just feels like
Yeah.
even like we're just going to want better AI models. Like, I saw a paper saying that they calculated the effect of artificial intelligence, like
It's
things like ChatGPT.
huge.
It's
Yeah.
gigantic, and it puts Bitcoin to
Yeah.
shame on the amount of computing resources, and even like the folks behind open
Yeah.
AI, like ChatGPT. He said the server costs to run it are eye-watering. Like, it's so much money because so we're like right at the very beginning of when we can run these large language models because they're so energy
Yeah.
intensive.
So I see energy use going up. I hope to see per capita going up and population going down. I made the mistake of reading Climate Change over the weekend, and don't do that if you like yourself. It's 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 basically to the point of global temperature average will go over 1.5 degree. It's too late,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and
for sure.
we've got to reduce the population. So yeah,
Well, but again, that's going to happen. Like the population decrease is locked in at this point. People are going to have to fight to make it go
okay.
if they want to increase
I'm
population.
down
So
with that.
so
I'm
that
here
part,
for
I think
that.
you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I think but I don't think that's going to. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to really impact climate change.
No.
Like, the remaining people will want to drive cars, burn oil, and live. They're going to want to live like, you talk to anybody in the developing world and you say, like, climate change is a big problem. Do you agree? And they're like, well, that's a you problem. Like, you you got to this high level of wealth
Yes.
on the backs of oil,
Mm-hmm.
and we're poor,
Mm-hmm.
and we deserve to have the same standard of living as you,
Yes.
and don't tell us to decrease our energy use as you drive around in your fancy cars and live in your fancy houses.
Yes.
And it's hard to argue with that line of reasoning.
Yes.
And so that's the problem. So the only way out of this, I think, is technology. Like, we need, I'm so heartened by the rise of renewable resources. The fact that there's like more. I think there's some great papers, like, and great articles just about how there's no economic now officially there's no good economic reason to build a coal plant
Yes.
or to even run a coal
Yeah.
plant. Like, except for like one plant, I think, where it's like sitting on top of a giant coal reserve. In every other case, it's like, it's, unless you hate money, the right move is to shut your coal plant down and put out solar panels and wind farms.
Yeah.
Only people who hate money will run coal plants. That's a good place for us to be.
Yep.
In energy, in the source of our energy, because the financial incentive is aligned with a better climate impact. So
yeah.
Nadia Yvette Chambers is saying AI is nowhere near as good as people are thinking it is. ChatGPT has some very blatant artifacts if you know what to look for. That's moving the goalposts. Like, people always do that when they say, but that's, sure, it can recognize pictures of cats, but that's not really artificial intelligence. Oh, sure, it can draw, it can generate images that fool the human eye into thinking, when you ask it any combination, I want to see an astronaut on the moon wearing snowshoes, and it draws you a picture. But that's not artificial intelligence.
People are confusing sentience and artificial intelligence, because you can have artificial intelligence that doesn't have the ability to feel, to innovate beyond itself, all those sorts of things. And so right now we have software that is capable of learning through training versus having the rules hard-coded into it. And that ability to learn through training is very much artificial intelligence.
Yeah, we can have a machine that dismantles planet Earth to build paper clips, and at no point did it have a sense of self.
Correct. Let's hope that isn't the fate of our planet. But
just outsmarted. You can have this outsmart humanity without ever being conscious.
Yes.
Like, so yeah, that's moving, and I think it's just moving the goalpost. Like I saw a paper where the next generation of this generative art is now making videos.
Yeah.
Right. And so now there's you describe a few bullet points of the video, like a teddy bear swimming under the ocean, and then the camera pans back and he's on a desert island.
Yeah.
And he's dancing around a fire.
Yeah.
And then it's a new Google thing. It will generate the video. It'll make this little movie for you. And it looks pretty good.
Silence.
And that's just today.
Silence.
Right? Like, I know. So,
yeah.
Like, yeah. So as the nano manipulators are tearing apart your atoms to build paper clips, you'd be like, but that's not really AI. Come on.
This is how we get the Matrix.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we've reached the end of our episode. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us today. Sorry for the technical problems. I promise you that Pamela will have worked through all of this stuff with her new microphone, better camera system.
Yeah.
And next week, we will start on time every time, and everything will be fine. And YouTube will send you a notification the moment our show has begun, so that you come and join us live and watch the show with us.
That is what happened today.
All technology will work.
Yes.
Yeah, all technology will work all the time.
Maybe.
So say we all.
So say we all. All right.
All right, thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.